Good day, everybody. This is August the 19th, and this is our latest episode of our WMD series. I'm very happy that you have been able to join us to view this discussion. I am accompanied by, my name is Oliver Boyd Barrett. Um, I am an emeritus professor of Bowling Green State University in Ohio, as well as an emeritus professor of the California State University system. I am with Ben Thomason, who is Ben. I'm going to allow you, when you get to introducing our first topic for this evening, if you would kindly tell our audience who you are and where you are from. And then likewise, I'm happy to say we are also accompanied by Samantha Nukonda this week, who is currently based in India, and he too will provide some further biographical details. So we have some topics lined up for discussion this evening, and each of us will introduce each of the three main topics that we are hoping to touch on. And I'm going to turn then to Ben. First of all, Ben, for you to talk about yourself, and then to introduce the topic that we want to talk about.
Thank you, Oliver. Yes, my name is Ben Thomason. I am a visiting professor of history at the University of South Florida. I'm coming to you from Tampa, the seat of CENTCOM, Central Command, the U.S. military. We're doing great things in the world, as always. Really, my entire life, it's been a story of great achievements, one after the other. Iraq, Afghanistan, Iraq again, Iraq a third time, Libya. The list goes on and on. Uh, I am born and raised in Michigan, however, and had lived in the Midwest for most of my life. Uh, and there are some exciting things going on in both Florida and the Midwest where I come from. Uh, we've been having this relatively new, at least in recent American decades, thing called democratic socialism. There have been several democratic socialists, self-described, elected to Congress. There is one in the Senate, perhaps the most famous in the United States, Bernie Sanders, uh, one of the most popular politicians in the United States, still, I believe. Um, and just recently, we have had some Democratic Socialist candidates win their primaries in places where people perhaps did not expect. There is most famously perhaps the election for the candidacy of Abdul El-Sayed, who is not described as a democratic socialist, but he is endorsed by the largest democratic socialist organization in the country, the Democratic Socialists of America. Very, very creatively named there. So I think what we wanted to talk about today was, what is this thing, democratic socialism? Why is it suddenly becoming popular in a country that has defined so much of its politics around a kind of anti-socialism, associating it with communism? Um, and what if these democratic socialists are getting into office and they are achieving political power, what are they doing? And if they actually achieve kind of majority power to actually enact their legislation that they wish to see, how much would that change things in the United States or in the world? It could change quite a lot because we know the US has a lot of influence in the world still, although we'll get back to how some of that influence may be declining or even outright collapsing. Uh, if Yes, gentlemen, I'd like to ask you about uh, what do you think of this thing that's happening in the US right now? What does democratic socialism mean? And what is its potential significance or real significance?
Well, I'm happy to jump in on that, Ben. I think it's highly significant that we do have for the midterms a raft of Democrats, young Democrats mainly, who seem to align themselves either explicitly or are aligned by others with the concept of democratic socialism. Uh, and inasmuch as I'm going to maybe take a slight risk here, but I think that although there will surely be different interpretations of the concept of democratic socialism, a unifying concept. But please forgive me if you think I'm just far too unreal or optimistic on this front. But a unifying concept, I think, in the different ideas that people bring to this concept of democratic socialism, if they're inclined to be positively attracted at all to it, is that a political philosophy of democratic socialism attributes considerable influence and power to a central, not necessarily a central, but to a political authority that operates both at central and at mid-level and at local levels. That operates from a very strongly articulated and passionate commitment to a politics for the greater good, for a society in which everybody may reasonably hope to benefit and to grow and to flourish. And when people hold to that kind of concept, I think what they're saying, in effect, is the current system that we have, which someone like myself might describe as a system of extreme or unfettered capitalism, does not work for the good of all, does not work so that we can all members of society can feel that they are treasured, that they are valued, and that they may reasonably hope to improve their circumstances and to thrive and to flourish. When I say that we live in a system of I beg your pardon, of unfettered capitalism, I also ought to acknowledge that we have a peculiar form of capitalism in this country, where the capitalist system, which is by its supporters, is prized as the emblematic expression of individual entrepreneurship, actually depends on the state. It's a form of state capitalism in which the state spends a very large proportion of all of its tax revenues from ordinary people on defense industries and on other activities and enterprises that do not, or many of which definitely do not work for the common good. So I think I'll just leave my comments at that level and invite Simanth to contribute, and also to you too, Ben, back when it goes back to you.
Yeah. So I also view these developments as a positive, because I think the kind of neoliberal democratic setup that we have in US and has been exported elsewhere through the globalization project hasn't been problematized enough. And it has somehow been taken as a default model of democracy. And since that has been attached with freedom and democracy, you can't question it. So they are raising these questions where in elections, even in India, a lot of money is being spent. If you go back, to the time of post-independence elections, there used to be really poor activists who would get elected, and many of them also died in poverty. A former chief minister of Andhra state died in debt and poverty, which is absolutely unthinkable now. Now they are probably multimillionaires and billionaires, everybody. And there was also a story about an MLA from actually where I come from, and he belonged to a minor faction of a communist party, belonged to a tribal community, and he's around. He bicycles. He's got no car. He takes the bus, and somehow I feel democracy has moved away from people it serves and is more engaged in regime change wars, which have been very critical to the democratic socialist. And I think with both Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn in UK, they have affected a change in political language. So the language did change to talk about issues like healthcare and income. Though I do feel that the cultural effects of neoliberal capitalism, like consumerism, should also be problematized, because somehow we end up participating in those kinds of things. So if there is a greater awareness and resistance to this cultural change projects as well, I think that will give it a greater fillip. And I do see some impact. There have been wage increases across the states, particularly in progressive states, and a lot of young people have tried to associate themselves with this kind of politics, discrimination issues. Um, and I think most importantly, right now, we are witnessing some shifts. Um, and I think this movement has also been instrumental in making regime change wars unpopular across board, and also the questioning of Israel right now. I think some changes are happening. So that's my broad opinion.
Thank you. Oliver, you brought up a couple of things I wanted to follow up on. The kind of idea of promoting the most good for the most people. I believe that's utilitarianism in the kind of philosophical jargon. That was an old slogan going back to the Farmers Alliance, one of the most important components of the Populist Party of the late 1800s in the United States. These were, in a lot of ways, you could call them kind of the original democratic socialists of America, and many of them did become socialists by the early 20th century. Uh, so yeah, let's about capitalism and the state. They have a big critique, right? That capitalism, the way that the economic system is set up, does not offer the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's a bit strange in the United States, again, in a country that has, for so long, celebrated the values of the free market, celebrated private ownership, private entrepreneurship, and all sorts of euphemisms that you can use to make the state of things as they are sound more pleasant, more or less pleasant. Um, I think something that unites many of these people is that deeper critique of the system as it is. Um, the so let's thinking about the Democratic Socialists of America. This is an organization that goes back to the 1980s. We can't really say that they even have a common united idea of what democratic socialism is, because frankly, the organization is rife with all sorts of factions. You can look them up. There are, I think, over a dozen caucuses within this organization. They vote in various blocks. They have various platforms, and they get into beefs. They have conflicts with each other, sometimes quite publicly. Um, it's if you pay attention to revolutionary left-wing politics, or even reformist left-wing politics, it's a organization that seems rife for some sort of major split or a kind of continued, uh, you could say, dysfunction, conflict over what democratic socialism means and what this organization should be doing. Uh, but despite that, it's had success so far. I would say that if we were to actually describe what their vision is of the people who are getting elected, these are people like Zoran Mamdani, mayor of the largest city in the United States. Uh, in Florida, we just had a primary election yesterday, and in an upset, Angie Nixon, black woman, member of the Democratic Socialists of America, supporter of Medicare for all, uh, critical of U.S. policy toward Israel uh, and Palestinians, relatively pro-Palestine, called for a ceasefire very early on in the genocide of 2023, I believe. These are common policies that many of these people, of these democratic socialists, share. Uh, I would describe it basically as social democratic, social democracy. This is something that was not particularly controversial in much of Western history. The first president or first chancellor of Weimar Germany in the 19 teens and 1920s was a democratic socialist, basically, or was a social democrat. Um, Reforming the capitalist system, putting guardrails on it, making sure that you don't have a Great Depression or you have massive poverty in ways that will be very destabilizing. You could one Some people have argued that democratic socialism and social democracy is uh, much more reformist than it is revolutionary. That it's more really about stabilizing the capitalist system and rubbing off some of its rougher edges. Uh, However, um, that progressivism at home is not always translated into progressivism abroad. Social democracy and democratic socialism has at various times been quite compatible with the kind of imperialist politics that we've been critiquing on this channel, um, getting involved in foreign wars, supporting colonialism in an earlier era. It has a complicated legacy. Um, that being said, of the people who are elected in the United States, um, who identify as democratic socialists, were members of the Democratic Socialists of America, or maybe were just endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. Uh, these are people who are the least committed to the empire, you could say. Uh, they might endorse drone strikes like Bernie Sanders did. They might endorse various wars, uh, but they are if if your investment is in the empire, and especially if your investment is in something like defending Israel, going to war with Iran, a kind of neoconservative political agenda, you don't I don't think you want democratic socialists to be in charge, even if they might not they might be willing to throw other people under the bus abroad. Their priorities are not going to be Israel. Their priorities are not going to be war with Iran nearly as much as many of these people would wish it to be. So I think that's a like very interesting kind of contradictory movements that we see where there on some ways these indicate much deeper changes, especially in the American culture and political culture in the US. But as far as policy, um, as far as policy outcomes happen, my suspicion, my sense is that uh, if democratic socialists generally gain power in the United States, um, they will um, they will be a piece of something much greater. Like if you have a majority democratic socialists in the United States, you won't just have democratic socialists. You will have communists. You will have people with more revolutionary politics. You might also have a kind of very virulent fascist politics develop in the country as well. It won't just be now you have Zoran Mamdani instead of Chuck Schumer in Congress. Um, so I th and I think that's one of the reasons. That's one of the big reasons why. Even though I think if their agendas were enacted, it would actually stabilize the capitalist system, as we talked about last week. I think it would stabilize the American system in many ways. There's a risk, there's a fear, and I think it's understandable that if the ruling class, if the powers that be, people with money and interests in these things, do allow a more radical politics like that, uh, even kind of social democracy politics, that will open up a kind of Pandora's box that they do not want opened. Uh, Sorry, there's just a couple other things I could jump on, but I'll leave it there because I think
Yeah,
we've
yeah,
I would love any other follow-ups about
thank
that.
you, Ben. It also, just so that for the benefit of viewers as well, it occurs to me listening to you talk and listening to Samantha talk that it's so difficult, isn't it, through the spoken word in a limited period of time to convey to audiences, in your case and Samant's case, the real complexity of the world that you thoroughly understand, but is inexpressible in a given period, a point in time,
Yes.
uh, and that's just part of the limitations, I suppose, of being human. Can I just pick up on one particular issue, Ben, that you raise that's always intrigued me, and it is the constant reiteration of disappointment with the elevation of what people that I regard perhaps as democratic socialists or simply being sort of left of center, and maybe Bernie Sanders falls into that category, and who, upon getting to power, seem to exercise so little real influence. That's bad enough. They hold to their values, perhaps, but they're simply unable to bring about significant change. So that's a source of disappointment. But then also, we see very often that people who appear to be getting elected on the basis of their, shall we say, progressive ideas, then turn out not to be so progressive in what it is that they vote for in Congress. And that in particular is interesting because it then raises the issue of is it that they are sort of re-socialized once they become members of the political class, and they become in a way different people, That's perfectly plausible, it seems to me. Is it because pressure is brought to bear on them, punishment and bribes that lead them in the end to vote for things that they wouldn't have voted for before they got elected? Um, is it because they're simply being used as pawns by the major political parties? So the Democratic Party, is it that the Democratic Party is really uh, part of the elite, but it needs to look as though it's got popular roots, and therefore it needs to have a certain number of people in the party who appear at least to be progressive, but who will not be allowed to exercise any real influence. Their progressive ideas will either somehow be stamped out, or they will simply prove to be ineffective in the long run. And then another, and perhaps for you gentlemen, this is way too extreme, and so please forgive me if that's how it comes across. But there is also, it seems to me, the role of the what we can loosely call the deep state, and the extent to which do we have a democratic political system really? Or do we have a system that's run by a permanent body of bureaucrats, much in the well, yeah, a permanent body of bureaucrats who are in power forever? Doesn't matter. Political parties come and go. They have arrogated to themselves the identity of what America is or should be and how America is going to behave. And the politicians are merely there to be bribed, to be manipulated, to be moved around the chessboard at the convenience of the deep state. So that brings us back to the issue, I think, of whether the political system that we have is it even capable of reform. If we always assume that the target for our reformist efforts is this political system, well, what good is that if the political system itself is simply a mirage, and that behind the political system is a different entity altogether with a totally different configuration of centers of power? So I think that's the. Oh, and please forgive me, but I earlier on I used the term state capitalism, forgetting, of course, that there's also a very long tradition within socialist movements of the critique of the Soviet Union as being a state, and indeed the critique of China today as being a form of state capitalism, where the state becomes the capitalist, if you will. The state itself becomes a capitalist functioning machine, and those who are in control or have their hands on the levers of power in that, they benefit more than anybody else. Now, that's a critique of communism. But I use state capitalism in a different sense, as I'm sure you realize, to refer to the extent to which our capitalist system, which is supposed to be based on individualism and enterprise and merit, is in fact dependent on the state for much of its revenue generating activity and opportunity and contracts and so on. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a lot that you touched on there that we could expand a lot on. I'm thinking kind of broadly. So getting back to the question of like what is democratic socialism, and also what does it even matter in the system, the context that we're in right now, the American system, the global system. So I think let's start with those two words, democratic socialism and the democratic socialists of America. Um, why do we add democracy in there? I would say in the United States, uh, it's probably in large part due to the Cold War and opposition to socialism. generally speaking, communism, more specifically, uh, this idea that socialism is not democratic. That's a popular idea in the United States, or at least Soviet-style socialism is not democratic. Um, I think many Soviet socialists or pro-Soviet socialists would say that it is democratic. It has a different idea of democracy. The Chinese call themselves democratic. The people in North Korea call themselves democratic. I mean, democracy means a lot of different things to different people. And more, I think what was it? Western polls have shown that more Chinese citizens view themselves as living in a democracy than Americans do, by a wide margin. Many Americans don't believe that they live in a democracy. Um, so adding on that qualifier, democratic socialists, and which I think for many of these people comes with the implication that there are many socialists who are not democratic, namely the Chinese, the Soviets, the Cubans, the Venezuelans. Go run down a list. Many of whom conveniently or interestingly line up with, the countries that the US has on its hit list. Uh, Venezuela, the old Soviet Union, many Cuba, of course, um, call themselves socialists, and apparently they're not. Apparently they're very different. Apparently they're not. Apparently they're not democratic. Um, and this Democratic Socialists of America organization is very much in that vein. These were anti-Soviet socialists of the 1970s and 1980s. Michael Harrington, one of the major founders of the Democratic Socialists of America, was quite staunchly anti-Soviet, anti-communist. It is illegal in the Democratic Socialists of America, or it's against their rules to be a member of a democratic centralist organization, which, hey, that also has the word democracy in it. Democratic centralist means Leninist, means Marxist, means usually like a supporter of the Soviet Union and state socialism, what some call state capitalism, right? Um, so and these people are running as Democrats. That's another strange thing. They're Democratic Socialists. They are members of the Democratic Socialists of America, and yet they are running by and large as members, well, not maybe members of, but as candidates of the Democratic Party, the American Democratic Party, which is a totally different organization, a very different organization, and a beast of an organization that we could spend hours talking about, I'm sure. Um, so they're in this weird bind, right? Where they are being constrained, they are being influenced by the anti-communist history of the United States, by being constrained by the Democratic Party itself, which has very different vision and is run by very different people, with many of whom have very different interests, um, and certainly different ways of looking at the world. They are constrained by all of these factors in American history and American society, constrained by the Constitution itself. Why are they running as Democrats? Because we have this weird system where we can really only have two political parties, and third parties can't get any traction, can't get any voice in politics. So, getting back to that question of what's the point of any of this? Can they actually make any change? Or are they constrained by the Democratic Party? Are they constrained by the deep state too much? Whatever you might call it, the oligarchy, however you want to describe or define that. Uh, my um, my suspicion is that um, I'm not a democratic socialist, so I guess I should just say that. I and I think that it is going to be constrained. It is going to be appropriated in a million ways. these politicians are going to disappoint the hell out of the American people, and certainly any like intellectuals and people who think and feel passionately about these things. However, mm, uh, whatever happens, whether it be these politicians simply being appropriated and just becoming part of the ship, part of this machine that doesn't actually change anything fundamentally, or if they get gunned down in the street by some Lee Harvey Oswald type with all sorts of weird connections to this oligarchic organization and that right-wing terrorist organization. Um, Whatever happens, I think what always matters for me more, and what I think is going to matter more is how that changes the political culture, like the movements of the masses and political organizations. Like those kinds of movements are the things that are actually going to make changes in here. And we've seen that in some ways, finally, American Democratic Party voters who vote in those primaries are now saying, uh, we want this stuff. We want this thing called democratic socialism. Maybe we even want socialism. There's a majority of young Americans uh, are favorable toward socialism, and there's like 40% of them that are favorable toward communism, according to some polls done recently. So people want this change. And they might even be willing to lose elections over it in the way that more right-wing Republicans were willing to lose elections to try to advance their political agenda. We've been told by politicians for so long that we need to compromise. Like it's just impossible to do these things that you want to see done. Give people health care, give people jobs, all this because we need to moderate so that we can win independents and moderate Republicans, and that's the only way to stop the Republicans from getting into power. Um, you know, Going back to Angie Nixon, Florida is basically a red state now. It used to be a swing state, but it's basically you could say it's a red state now. It's a Republican state. And she's a pretty left-wing candidate as far as national American politics goes, and she beat Alex Vindman pretty handily in that election. Alex Vindman, funny enough, being the Ukraine whistleblower back in 2019, who leaked this phone call between Zelensky and Trump, where Trump said that he would not give Ukraine weapons to fight in eastern Donbass at the time because the Russian invasion hadn't happened yet. And he was going to withhold these weapons until Zelensky gave him dirt on Hunter Biden, right? He was Alex Vindman was the man who blew the whistle on that. He's a big supporter of Israel, big supporter of American empire, and a democratic socialist got this candidacy in Florida, where we have this large Cuban community, anti-Castro, anti-socialist Venezuelan and Cuban community. Uh, that's those are and she might lose the election. She very well might lose the election. Alex Vindman was also polling very badly compared to the Republican. Alex Vindman was very much likely also going to lose that election. Angie Nixon might actually do better in that election than Alex Vindman would do, even if she may lose. But that argument that we need to moderate no longer seems to be holding, and that is a big change, and that can lead to to big changes because more like it's just going to become impossible to ignore if people are really mobilized around these issues that they want to see real even radical change.
Yeah.
I'll stop there because I'm rambling on too long.
Thank you for making your comments so topical as well, Ben. I'd like to make a bridge to a second topic. All of these topics we're going to come back to. I'm quite sure we're going to be coming back to all of these topics many times. in different ways. But I'd like to make a bridge to the second question that we had set ourselves to talk a bit about this evening, and that is it relates to is also relating back to this concept of democracy, and it's connecting this concept to another concept, rather more controversial for some people at least, that of regime change. Why is it, as I think most people have now come to accept and to see, why is it that the United States spends so much money and so much effort and so much state involvement in changing the regimes, the systems of government in other countries, and is it because the United States just so much believes in something called democracy that it thinks it's really important that everybody be democratic in the same way that the United States thinks of itself as being democratic? So I'd like to pass this throw this topic to you, Sumant, because it's something that's very central, I know, to your own research and publications.
Yeah, so thank you, Oliver. I think there is a bridge between the two topics that that we are exploring here. So I think broadly the context could be, after World War II, once we moved into a world with which was there was decolonization, and also there was the UN system, uh, to keep peace between nations, and I think the question then is, I think, did the West lose its imperial character? Unfortunately, I mean, people like Anthony Smith would say that decolonization is past, and as critical as they are of colonialism, colonialism is in the past. As critical as they are of colonialism, they tend to believe that, especially since this, the project of Reaganomics or neoliberalism took up, they tend to believe that now we are in a different world. So are we really in a different world? And I would also like to point to this study in Lancet that came out in November 25, which says that since 1971, due to unilateral sanctions of United States, around 38 million people have died. And a big part of that is children. So outside of, wars and genocides, which have gotten us some attention, right? Both in Gaza and in Yemen, less in Yemen though, and the Iran war, which is kind of being opposed across board, even by the Western mainstream media. I mean, the reasons may be different. They think it's being done in the wrong way, but I think all of these kind of point to a political culture which is imperialist, and I think regime change is it's also interesting. I think the connections as the globalization project was pushed forward in the 90s. In 1994, you have Gene Sharp's book, From Dictatorship to Democracy. So so they were like, this old Soviet system is collapsing, but it has left behind a lot of dictatorships. So let's democratize them. and and then there are several other additions to that. You have Popovic and Miller. Strada Popovic also participated in Serbian uh, law activist movement for, which was instrumental in removing Slobodan Milosevic. And they so the language here is that of democracy, using tactics to undermine, using tactics, non-violent tactics. And this kind of goes back to Gandhian techniques, which were used in India and America as well by Martin Luther King Jr. And and Nelson Mandela. So are they being faithful to that? But the thing is, when you are democratic and when you're non-violent, then you're good, right? So yeah, so Popovich also started this organization called Canvas, and then later he wrote a book, Blueprint for Revolution. So how to carry out revolutions. And then there is another um, book that I've seen, which is like um, Peter Pomerantsev, a Ukrainian who's written "This is not propaganda," and this is about how to westernize kind of Ukraine and help it, stand up to Russia. More recently, you have Gene Donovan, who's talking about using memes. So the point is that why are certain regimes targeted and not certain other regimes? We know that there are monarchies, absolutist monarchies in Gulf. So why is nothing deployed there to liberalize or democratize? And and why Bangladesh, for instance? So these are questions. So a lot of questions are actually absent from public debate. Is there an imperial character to relations between nations? Unilateral sanctions not imposed by UN bodies, right? Now, it is a valid question, the issues raised by Ben. I agree with him. If everybody follows the UN system, will the world become better, given the kind of hegemony there is? But I think some problematization has to happen. And for that, I do see that there is some relief in the sense that you have these people who call themselves democratic socialists. Because, my father was saying, I mean, in a country like America, with the Red Scare, and if there is somebody like Bernie Sanders who is remotely using the term like socialists, and Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, that is a huge change. That is a huge change. And because because yeah, I mean, I was reading something quite ridiculous. I'm going to jump between different topics. I hope I make sense. I was reading something really ridiculous, and I think I should bring this to your notice. It is certainly not worth reading. So this is a book that has come by a popular journalist on mainstream Indian networks. It's called Modi and India. And while explaining, there is a critique of Western coverage of India, which is nice to see. But when it comes to the idea of the Hinduization thesis that is put forth, He says that the innate Hindu tolerance for multiculturalism and various forms of theism is more akin to the temperament of Christians in several Christian majority nations. So, in effect, India embracing its Hindu past will not become a Hindu Pakistan, but it will become a Hindu Britain or Hindu America. And that is what is being said. Now, I think it's a real poverty of culture here, and if you're going to look at America for everything, it is better to have a democratic socialist movement there, because if you look at your own legacy, I mean, you have had all kinds of ideologies here in India. You had, mainstream communist, and there are powerful critiques to those movements as well, and elite capture of those parties and how they ruled. Um, but I also would like to kind of go back to non-Western ideas, um, you know, and not just rooted in Western morality. So I think a lot of us tend to be elites, educated elites tend to be, drawing something critical from Nehruvian ideas. And if we go further back in history, I think in terms of morality, I want to push back. I'm no expert in this topic, but the way I understand, Buddha, almost 3,000 years ago, avoided debates on existence of God, philosophical debates on whether God exists or not, or what is the nature of God and what we should do. And he came up with a fairly simple thesis. He said that uh, objective reality of human life is human suffering, and it is kind of built in nature itself. For instance, even if there are no problems, people are going to die, and they are going to grow old, and they will be inflicted with disease, and they will suffer. So there is, and that became the central point of philosophy. The whole point of existence, more than God or something, or philosophy, or constructing an empire or ordering a society, is how can we help human suffering? What can we do? So that idea of India, and I don't think that we should be strictly bound by West. I know we have adopted West, and I've seen a journalist, a fairly sensible journalist, saying that India is a very American country. Everybody now is like growing up thinking that they are American. And I mean, I'm again pointing to cultural changes here, but and I think this idea of India did permeate the independence movement. Gandhi also reformulated it in his very own way, by saying that all religions are equal and all religions are great. And basically, what all religions and all gods are telling us is to serve humanity and serve those who are suffering. And for his time, the suffering came from colonialism, the extreme forms of poverty and divisions being pushed forward by direct colonization. His protege, Nehru, also drew from it, and pushed for scientific inquiry, Nehru Memorial Museum. And I saw in his bedroom there were statues of Buddha. In his workroom there were statues of Buddha. On his desks there were, like, I don't know, there were so many statues. And and then you also have Ambedkar, who started the Neo-Buddhist movement, and he found Buddhism to be the answer for everything. And he had his own take of Buddhism, and he wanted people to actually embrace Buddhism in a very formal way. not just Indians, but around the world. Uh, so, so this, kind of brings, two questions together. I think what we have kind of discussed is this imperial character of West, and how it has entrenched its politics, whereby it doesn't allow alternative ideas, and this Red Scare business, which has kind of pushed people into a hole, where Bernie Sanders has to come out and frequently say he's a democratic socialist, and how it shuts out some conversations. And if there is, if somehow they dig out of the hole, however unsatisfactory their initial forays may be, I mean, what else do we have to hope for? Will a billionaire solve all the problems? So I think that points to this wider crisis, I think, in democracy, in thought, in culture.
Yeah. Thank you, Samantha. Those are really, really thought-provoking questions and issues that you raised. Let me just go unpack a couple of ideas from your earlier comments, specifically with respect to regime change. But I know. Let me just start from the basic point you're making is that there are different cultures, there are different values, there are different belief systems, different cultures, and if you look closely enough at any of these belief systems or any of these cultures, what you usually end up with is being able to identify the expression of certain values, and that cultures work and belief systems work because their adherents more or less feel aligned with these essential values. And really, the range of possible values that humans can have is not that huge, really, because we are all the same species and are all subject and exposed to very similar sort of sets of problems. And yet, so what is really quite beautiful in what you have just been saying, you're talking to the richness of human culture. It's talking to the possibility of finding universals, even in the motley proliferation of belief systems and religions and all, and so on and so on. And that's what the West, the political West, if we can call it that, I suppose, thought it had discovered when there was sufficient animus against the inefficiencies and the brutalities and the sufferings caused by the old aristocratic or monarchical or aristocratic systems that flourished through Europe in the Middle Ages. And as people began to question these systems and began to develop, first of all, in very rudimentary ways, ideas that gave agency to the ordinary man and woman, and critiqued the arrogance of kingly power, and bit by bit stumbled, if you like, on its own version of democracy. The West wasn't the first to get there, because there have been other civilizations that have also struggled with these systems and with these possibilities. But here in the West, we're encouraged to think that there's only one history. It's the history of the West, and it's really a good system. It's worked great for everyone, except for all of the wars and all of the class systems and so on. But it's really worked very, very well. And everyone else should well, they just need to accept our system is really good. And they should have it. And if their leaders don't allow them to have it the way that we think they should have it, well, we'll go right in there and we'll install it for them. So that's the kind of thinking. And I'm making it sound farcical, because it is farcical, but it's also something that's at least apparently truly believed or is it? Or is it just a thin, unconvincing story that elites use in order to justify something that's far rawer and more brutal, which is to say, the thievery and robbery of the wealth and resources that we want and that other people have. We need some excuse for getting at their wealth. I think that's essentially what regime change is all about, using democracy as a pretext for stealing other people's stuff. And the best way to steal other people's stuff is to find, in any society that you want to steal from, you identify people who already have power and who would like some more power, and you promise them untold rewards if they if they do what you want them to do. It's really not that complex, actually. It's all embarrassingly human and shallow and unappetizing. So you buy out people who are only too willing to be bought out, often because they've got loads of problems of their own, trying to keep their own peasants in order, and welcome the help of a superior power, promise to do everything they can to help that superior power, because in the process, they're going to become richer, they're going to become more powerful in the local context, and the only people who have anything to lose are all the poor people who, well, they may very well end up poorer, but that's just life. And I think essentially this is how the whole regime change mentality operates. It's operating more brutally now because bit by bit, as the idealism that was spun by World War II, by the erection of the United Nations, the failures of the United Nations are now so gross that I think people are giving up on those ideals. There are lots of other reasons too that might explain a new era of that is absent of idealism, and is absent, therefore, of the morality that idealism lends itself to. And another term, by the way, another term maybe for regime change politics. The most important agencies, by the way, as many of our readers know, here in the United States, we have the National Endowment for Democracy. We have USAID, which has just recently been folded into the State Department. It hasn't been abolished whatsoever. It continues to do its work, only now it's even less transparent than it ever was because it's folded within the State Department. That's why it was folded into the State Department, so that it could operate with less transparency. And there are loads of other agencies and non-government organizations and so on that are party to this politics of regime change. The idea is that it's something that's invisible. Your own people don't need to see. In fact, you don't want your own people to see it. They want to be kept in a state of blissful ignorance and innocence as to what it is that you are really doing in overseas countries. And the work of regime change was initially performed by the CIA. I mean, it started off celebrating itself with the great victories it thought that it had achieved by overthrowing the democratic regime led by Arbenz in Guatemala in the early 1950s. We had to get rid of him because he wasn't very good news for the banana company. Today it's called United Fruit, I believe I'm right in saying. They were worried that Arbenz was saying, well, there's an awful lot of unused land that United Fruit owns, and it would be very useful if our peasant class could actually access some of that land, and we'll lease it from United Fruit and make it available for cultivation. Anyway, that was way too dangerous, way too socialistic an idea for the CIA. at that time. And then just a year later, another great CIA achievement apparently was the overthrow of the this was actually through a direct coup d'etat. It's actually not regime change; it's just brutal brutal overthrow by force of the regime Iran. Of course, the regime, the democratic regime of Mohammad Mossadegh, whose main crime in Western in the Western perspective was that he thought that Iranians should actually benefit to some extent by all of the wealth that was being extracted from the economy by the British-controlled Persian, what's it called? The Persian Oil Company. I'm not remembering it precisely correct.
Anglo-Iranian Oil Company.
Okay, thank you. So the Brits got together with the Americans. The Brits got together with the Americans, who were only too delighted to get this opportunity to seize Iranian wealth and to be, to join the party. So that was kind of work that the CIA grew up doing and perfected over time. But then it became all too embarrassing in the wake of the temporary revelations as to what the CIA was really all about during the 1970s. We had a number of the last time that the work of the CIA has really been exposed to public scrutiny in a number of different congressional investigations in the 1970s, and that was way too embarrassing. So the CIA decided that this work should be done by somebody else, that they call the National Endowment for Democracy, which is supposedly a non-government organization, but it's totally funded by government, as far as I can make out, principally the US government. Another term for regime change that people would use, and maybe it makes better sense, I don't know, is low-intensity conflict. So low intensity, instead of conflict being about armies and huge amounts of weapons and nuclear bombs and all the rest of it, it's all soft power. It's the maneuvering of soft power. You manipulate people through bribes, through ideology, through propaganda. You put money behind one party that holds views that, and all the things that the CIA had already been long doing, like, for example, in Western Europe in the immediate post-war period, the CIA, one of perhaps the most important activity of the CIA in the immediate post-war period was to stop the left-wing parties coming into power in Western Europe, because communist parties were at that time very strong throughout much of Western Europe, and or parties that were at least far too socialistic for the CIA. So that's a large part of what the CIA was doing in the this normalized this whole thing about this normalized U.S. regime change or low intensity conflict operations. So many middle class or bourgeois parties benefited from this form of US interventionism. They grew accustomed to it. They grew to expect that they could always look to the CIA and its equivalent agencies for assistance in its permanent, perennial struggle against the primitive forces, if you will, or the bottom-up forces of socialism and communism. And that's really produced the kind of system that we have today, where everyone in the bourgeois world totally accepts the idea, it's perfectly normal order, it's perfectly fine to structure public discourse around totally nonsensical ideas, so long as it works. So it's totally fine, even if your own intelligence agencies tell you that Iran, for example, just to pick an example, Iran has no nuclear weapons, has no intention of acquiring nuclear weapons, actually considers that having nuclear weapons is evil and abhorrent and against the wishes of God. And even when that view is endorsed by your supreme leader and religious lieutenant or religious commander, despite all of that, you can still go around saying, and even though a neighboring country like Israel has stolen nuclear technology from the United States, has, without any supervision by the International Association of Atomic Energy, without any exposure to their surveillance and to their regular inspections, has developed an armory of 200 or more nuclear weapons. It's perfectly reasonable. Every reasonable European, educated, Western bourgeois person understands that, yes, of course, it's total nonsense. But if we keep talking in this way, we kind of make that discourse, it acquires its own reality. And through using that discourse to totally confuse your own peasants, you get away with the destruction of entire societies and entire civilizations, as Donald Trump on occasions seems to want.
I think we really ought to have a whole series on democracy promotion, American soft power interventions, covert operations, the CIA's cultural Cold War, because that whole story is perfect for the kind of weapons of mass distraction uh, idea theme that we have here. So we'll have to plan for that, I think. Uh, I wanted to pick up just very briefly on what Suman said about Gene Sharp. Uh, he grew up in North Baltimore, Ohio, about 12 or 13 miles south of Bowling Green, Ohio, where, of course, Oliver was a professor and I was a PhD student. I rode my bike down to North Baltimore a few times to explore the area. Nobody knows who Gene Sharp is at Bowling Green State University. I asked many different academics, many different scholars there, and not a single one of them knew who Gene Sharp was, which I found very interesting. We could have an entire that's an important part of the soft power, foreign intervention, regime change, democracy promotion story. So we could have an entire episode on that fine gentleman. Uh, if you'll indulge me, because I am also writing a book essentially about democracy promotion, and I've been trying to write as much as I can. So this is very fresh in my head. I have a couple of things. I'll try to be brief about it. I want to just start with a quote. Since Oliver reminded me of this, bringing up Jacobo Arbenz, Operation PB Success, the CIA's overthrow of Arbenz in Guatemala. Very interesting quote from Juan Jose Arevalo, the first democratically elected president of Guatemala before Arbenz. And this is what he had to say in his farewell address. This is after Arbenz is elected, and then this is Arevalo uh, handing the reins, peaceful in a peaceful democratic transition, handing the reins to this newly elected Jacobo Arbenz. Here's what Arevalo says. He says, "On the 15th of March, 1945, when I ascended to the presidency of the nation, I was possessed by a romantic fire. I still believed, besides, and with reason, that the Republic of Guatemala could rule itself, without submission to external forces, free from the mandates that did not emanate from the popular will of the majority. It was then, with the deepest despondency and pain, that I felt, with consequent indignation, the pressure of that anonymous force which rules, without laws or morals, international relations and the relationships of men. The war that began in 1939 ended, but in the ideological dialogue between the two worlds and two leaders, President Franklin Roosevelt lost the war. The real victor was Hitler. Little caricatures of Hitler sprang up and multiplied in Europe and here in the Americas. It is my personal opinion that the contemporary world is moved by the ideas that served as the foundation on which Hitler rose to power." And now I just have to imagine Jacobo Arbenz's reaction to that. As in, this is Arevalo saying to Arbenz, "Good luck, buddy. This is yours now." I
That's
thought I could do something with this. I thought we lived in a democracy. That's not actually the case. Good luck. You're in charge now. And we know that that did not work out well for Arbenz. So this was done by the Americans. That coup in Guatemala, Democrat against the democratically elected government. Um, so these are the things that make people question the universalist claims of Western powers, certainly the United States. The universalist claims that we will treat everyone fairly and will apply the same laws and rules for our own people as we will for other people. We will do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Um, uh, does that is that a constant taint within Western foreign policy, within Western culture even? I would say that this is, and I won't go too deeply into this, but I would say just very quickly, this is a problem with liberalism. I think that at least Western liberalism, as it has existed and kind of spread throughout the world, it has always had these universalist claims to liberate humanity from all sorts of uh, material and political oppressions and sufferings. Uh, it's it claims that it's a universal ideology. It's a universal way of looking things and solving people's problems. Uh, and I think that ideology developed alongside imperialism and capitalism, and that liberalism, as I'm of the belief that political ideologies essentially spring uh, out of the material reality that they exist in. The economy essentially is going to have profound effects on the culture and people's ideas because people are going to have a lot of interest in thinking in particular ways that will help them make money or help them secure their existence. And uh, there's a great writer who had an interesting book about liberalism, a counter history, Domenico Lacerdo, Italian historian and philosopher, who asked the question, was John C. Calhoun a liberal? John C. Calhoun was this famous American politician who was known for contributing to a lot to ideas about American government and rule of law and all that. He was also an ardent white supremacist, ardent proponent of African slavery, chattel slavery. You can look at John Stuart Mill, who said all these wonderful things about democracy and how we should all be equal within British culture, but did not apply the same thing to Indians. Indians apparently were not ready for self-government and these kind of liberal freedoms that he was espousing. Um, I think we can ask a similar question today about many people. Is Benjamin Netanyahu a liberal? Uh, I think I would say yes. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is a liberal. Uh, he may have what many might call illiberal ideas, but he is was embraced by liberal politicians and liberal powers for decades. I mean, look at all those photos of him with Barack Obama, with Joe Biden, with the like standard bearers of liberalism in the West. All these liberal Western countries say Israel represents our values. You know, they are a liberal, democratic Western state, the only democracy in the Middle East, as they love to say over and over again. And we know that in this liberal system, there's always been, yes, there's always this idea of universal freedoms for everyone, but it also has always come with deep vast exclusions for so many people. The Prime Minister of Canada earlier this year had a very stirring speech that caused a lot of uproar at Davos, where he basically said, "Look, we knew this liberal international order thing wasn't actually universal. How international law would apply to you depended on what country you were from. It depended on kind of money that you had. We went along. Canada went along with this fiction of this universal liberal international order because it was useful for Canada. It was in our interest to do so. We benefited from essentially being a junior partner in this global mafia that was willing to accept genocide of Palestinians, genocide of this and that, other people who are not seen as within the community of the free. They're not really seen as good enough, not quite ready for full humanity yet. That kind of exclusion's always occurred. Just very briefly, I will say, interesting part about what I've been trying to research and write about right now is where are the roots of American democracy promotion? Where do we trace the roots of that? And a very interesting thing is that no scholar, no writer writing about democracy promotion has rooted the early roots of has located the early roots of American democracy promotion in U.S. foreign policy toward indigenous nations, toward American Indian nations, even though you can very well make the argument that the U.S. did export its system of democratic Republican government to many different indigenous groups, namely what were called the five civilized tribes in the early 1800s. The Cherokee being prime among them. They had a constitution in 1827 that was very much modeled off of the U.S. Constitution. And what happened to them? What happened to those five civilized tribes? They tried to, in many ways, embrace these ideas that the U.S. was promoting out in the world, said, we want everyone to live this way, and if they live this way and think these ways, then we'll all be more free, we'll all be more democratic, we'll all be better off. They were dispossessed. They were victims of genocide. It was not good enough. The Americans were promoting their system of government, their ideas, not to advance the goodwill and interests and prosperity of indigenous nations, but to advance U.S. interests in an imperial project to take their land and expropriate them, get rid of them. And I think you can apply that to what happened all the way up to U.S. involvement in the Syrian civil war and U.S. doing all these things in the name of democracy abroad. And so it's always tied to this kind of very violent imperialist mindset, imperialist system. So I've been going on for a bit, but I want
Yeah.
to bring it back to something Suman said earlier, and I think to tie it into the last thing we wanted to talk about the decline of the U.S. So Oliver, you mentioned USAID being kind of folded into the State Department. That this chicanery that USAID has gotten up to is still going on, just in a different form. They're trying to cover it up more. Many people have argued, and we can debate this, what people think about it, but many have argued that American soft power has taken a serious hit. American soft power has declined, whether it's because of USAID or because of a million other things. It's suffered. It has suffered greatly from what it once was. America is not nearly as attractive as it was previously. Not as convincing, not as credible on the world stage.
Yeah, Ben, can I just interrupt you for I'm looking at the time here, and I know that up until now we tried to so we struggled to kind of get a 1.5 to 2 hour sort of period for these. so you're rightly, I mean, you're entering into what we had earlier thought could be our third question for today. And I'm not sure, I mean, it's a very important question. So for the benefit of our viewers, that question has to do with whether we are actually witnessing the decline or even the collapse of American empire. For example, we see would seem that the Trump administration has been deeply embarrassed by the ability of Iran to maintain closure over the Strait of Hormuz and to interrupt global trade flows in oil and fertilizer and commodities and all. And then we also see the Trump administration really, in essence, arguably, has been equally badly humiliated over Ukraine, where I mean, Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is basically saying, we're fed up, totally fed up and disillusioned with you guys. We thought maybe there could be a basis for negotiation on the basis of what you put on the table when we met in Alaska in August 2025, but you didn't mean it. Nothing has resulted from that meeting. And so far as we're concerned, the only likelihood is the war will continue and we will win. So the question we were going to get to had to do, well, is this indicative of imperial decline, or are there alternative perspectives? And of course, there are alternative perspectives, and we wanted to begin to unpack all of that. But I think I'm looking to you guys for guidance. I'm not sure we can really we can barely deal with any of the questions that we've raised this evening. We have to come back to all of these things over the next few weeks and months, maybe even years. But this one, certainly, I don't think we can even begin to do much justice to in the space of, say, 10 minutes. But might we be able to, perhaps each of us, to sort of round off this evening's conversation, and I'm looking to Samantha really to start this. Maybe some of your thoughts and your insights about any of these things that we've been talking about this evening so far. So very broad.
Yeah, I think very broad. Very broadly, I was, this idea of Americanization of indigenous nations. I think that has a broader message for imperial world order. I remember, Linda Dixon at Bowling Green State University. I read one of her articles where she wrote about, it was kind of autoethnographic, from her mother and stuff, and how the assimilation project was, almost a project of erasure, with men being killed and women being taken as wives, and those women struggled to maintain their culture. And I thought, so when you talk about, when Oliver was talking about resource capture, right? So what is this regime change about? What is this about? It's about repatriating profits, right? So that is what was the problem. Mossadegh wanted a paltry share, I guess, 18% or, I don't know, of what British Petroleum was making. So this, this kind of resource capture, and I think so. I think this is a old imperial project of colonization driven by greed, and then twisting ideologies to kind of contain people, using whatever religion as an opium. And I would like to say, in modern times, perhaps consumerism as a religion to contain people from asking questions. So I think my broader thought would be, can we think of, I mean, a lot of, progressive thought comes, from various factions of left. And this is what I've been thinking aloud with my take on ancient Indian philosophy or thinkers like Buddha, is that how about being a bit Luddite and asking questions like what has been lost in this march of empire over centuries. What may have been of value in indigenous cultures, in Cherokees and their practices, or what may have been of value in other cultures that is now being overtaken by this resource-intensive capitalism and this form of consumerism, which is dictating, human lives. Really, I mean, I would also like to talk about population crisis in China and India. China reversed its one-child policy, seeing that the populations are declining quite dramatically. And some parts of India, urban and southern parts, are witnessing a dramatic decline. So it doesn't appear to be stabilizing, but imploding or collapsing in some parts. So yeah, so these ideological shifts and these consumerist lifestyles and what we are doing to the environment and to ourselves, um, you know, can we also, I think we should look back at ancient cultures and see how they lived with nature and in some form of simplicity, not to over idealize them. They had their problems. There were feudal structures, there were oppressive structures, and we are definitely not trying to revive them in any form, but in the spirit of learning. Because this present system, I think this is one thing that we here at WMD, forcefully articulate, that the present system of this, neoliberal democracy is working for a lot of people. The kids, as I said, that study in Lancet, 500,000 per year die due to secondary sanctions, and that is a bit more than how many people die in direct wars. So these are some and I really your insights into this USAID magic trick. And but I also wanted to add, perhaps there are different phases to the evolution of these imperial characteristics. So there's direct colonization. There is post-war years, the Cold War years. I think what we are what I'm hearing, perhaps the Cold War politics and the politics of unipolarity. There is shift in tactics there as well. More coups and direct takeovers during Cold War, and now, of course, wars, given the unparalleled power of the military forces, and then also more sophisticated deployment of a kind of democracy, or subversion of the terms democracy, nonviolence, and things like that.
Yeah. 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 I yeah. Thank you so much, Samanth. I think I'd like just to spend 5 minutes, my final 5 minutes, and then go back to Ben. I'm going to draw. Ben was reminding us all that regime change really, well, it didn't require America to invent the concept of regime change. It's an older practice than that. But he was talking very in a very articulate way about how the first victims, really, of our regime change inclinations were our very own, but defeated people, the Native Americans. And so that kind of it prompts me to say that, well, yes, I mean, this is part of the problem, isn't it? Is it only an American problem? Probably not. But that we're even at the very beginning, even before we got started, we're waist deep in utter BS, in utter hypocrisy. It's just unavoidable. It's like, I suppose, what the Catholic Church would describe as original sin. We are born in original sin. We've already sinned even before we're born. And, so I think of Jefferson, the lauded drafter the demand for independence, and he was a slave owner. He didn't have to be a slave owner. Lots of his comrades or his colleagues were giving up their slaves, but not Jefferson, apparently. And then you got Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he's the guy, in order to save the Union and to stop the spread of slavery in the new Western states, he's the one who conjures up the idea of just giving away land to those who are prepared to drift into the territories beyond the Appalachians. And there's no requirement that the land not belong to anyone else. Doesn't matter whose land it is. You just go in and you take it, and we'll recognize however many acres it was that were promised them. And then you have Grant, the successor to Abraham Lincoln, or near successor. I think he was our third president. A man actually who had really some promise, I thought, until faced with the problem that the South just insisted on going back to their bad old ways and sort of forgetting about all this business of Africans being free and behaving as though, well, no, they're not free and they can't really be allowed to participate in our political process and all of that. The moment that the nation, the union, the world needed a president, needed Grant just to fight again, fight another civil war. Yes, that's the reason he didn't do it, because he was tired of fighting, and he was rightly worried about a nation that was sick and tired of fighting. But it was what he was called upon by history, or by a human history. It was what he was called upon to do, and he didn't. And so we spent the next 100 years or so pretending that we have freed the African slaves, but of course we hadn't. Ben, any final thoughts?
Thank you. I'll keep this hopefully just a couple minutes. I did want to just bring up the book that Sumanth shared with us earlier, with if I remember correctly, the argument that it'll be okay if India adopts a kind of Hindu identity politics, Hindu nationalist politics, because we'll end up like a kind of Hindu Britain or United States. Uh, that pitch, that argument, is going to be less convincing and attractive to people as if things keep going on the way that they do. America and Britain not going to look very attractive as time goes on if things continue the way they do. So I don't know if that's such a great idea to become just like these countries. As a born and raised American my entire life, I can tell you it's not sunshine and roses here. Um, but I think to just kind of bring it back to our conversation about capacity for change, especially the democratic socialist challenge to the status quo that we see today and whether it's worth anything. Um, I think again with this problem of liberalism, and I'd love to have more conversations about this. That uh, what really limits people's horizons and the political possibilities in our society is the I don't know, the fear, the refusal to try to look beyond liberalism, to really critique liberalism and to think that uh, actually, maybe the West isn't the best. It's not the pinnacle of humanity, and there are things that we could learn from so many other people, including many of the people who have been villainized as primitive or as evil, dictatorial, for so long. Once you have, we need to have more people who are uh, who say want these changes, call it socialism, which I think people will continue to call it socialism. That'll be very popular. Um, to not be walking on eggshells so much that we're going to offend the status quo kind of liberals, as if like they are the respectable people and we need to be respectable in the way that they are. We need to appeal to them. We need to be legitimate in their eyes. Once people start to say, well, no, we don't actually need to care about what these people think. We don't need to jump up and down about how much we love America and how much we love the American system and the American even Constitution and all that. But like that we can imagine alternatives and we can change things in profound ways, in many ways that the founding fathers did. I mean, they weren't they didn't have religious loyalty to the political system that they were a part of and the respectable establishment they were part of. They said, we're gonna do our own thing and advance our own interests and make a lot of money and we're gonna get power and not be so worried about that. And once you have politicians in elected office who are willing to say those things, and not just be like walking on and saying, no, actually, I'm democratic. I'm not like those bad socialists that we've been told about for so long. I think we're going to be in a very different situation once we have actually elected leaders who are really willing to stick to those guns and say, no, this is what we're about, and we refuse to budge an inch. Uh, and in some ways like the old abolitionists, to like take it back to U.S. Grant and Abraham Lincoln. The old abolitionists kind of had a similar trajectory. I would love a discussion about that as well, because I think it's actually very relevant to a lot of things today. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'll leave it there. I think that's good.
yeah, that's a great, more positive note, really, to end on, Ben. Thank you. Might I just picking up very, very quickly, pick up on that, U.S. being the land of sunshine and roses kind of thing. I noted the other day, it was an article by Ben Norton, um, uh, critiquing some of the assertions that people make about how incredibly lucky and fortunate American citizens are because we're living in apparently what is the second, the country, the number two country of the world after Switzerland in terms of how wealthy we all are, and pointing out that this kind of assertion is based on the very simplistic use of the concept of average.
Mhm.
An average, you take the average wealth of 10 people in the room, and one of those if, 9 people are earning 1,000 a year, and then there's a billionaire and he's earning a billion, of course. Well, the average wealth of those 10 people is going to be in the multi millions. Whereas in reality, of course, each of those nine of those individuals are just earning $1,000 a year. But if you look at the median wealth, what you find is that the United States today ranks 29th in that. It's still not bad, but it's way less than we in the United States are encouraged to believe or to think about. And even Great Britain, which is in a very sorry state economically, comes out at number 19, I think it was. And then you find that the United States is actually actually behind Slovenia. and Austria. So I just thought I'd share that with you by way of closing. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a really enjoyable discussion, and I know that we need to talk much longer and in much greater depth and detail about all of the things that we've touched upon this evening. And I hope very much that we can meet again, hopefully this time next week, perhaps if we're very lucky, also to be joined by Christian Vukasovic, who is currently in Serbia. So I think he'll have some interesting things to share with us about Serbia next time that he joins this conversation. So with that, I am going to again to thank you, and I'm going to stop this recording.